Hi there and welcome to the first of 2 sessions with Todd and I.
And in these sessions, we're going to show you how to make a sign using some of the tools in your Vectric software. So first of all, it would be good to look at what we think are some good traits of a good sign, and then maybe we can talk a little bit about the tools that we have in our software that will allow us to make some of those things.
Yeah, well, we'll start with look at some of the 2D elements. So you can see here a lot of the signs that we've got. You know, there's contrast in there, we've got text, there's different materials, so you could think about materials. You could use the inlay feature to kind of raise your text. Obviously, some other examples are using like pockets where you use paint to create that contrast, and that's just a really easy, designed to create, and along with like your profiles as well.
Fair enough, yeah. So those are really great and all available in Cut 2D. So in VCarve Pro and VCarve Desktop, we add the ability to be able to create texture toolpaths, which is a nice way to add a little bit of, well, obviously texture because that's what it's called, but add a little bit sort of interest to the backgrounds of your signs, or maybe even the foregrounds if you'd like to. You can do 2.5D stuff. So that's like using the geometry of your tool to actually create things like V-carving, prismatic letters, inlays, and so on, which really can up the scale or up the interest in your sign, I guess I could say. And there's 2.5D edge finishes. So instead of just going along and having nice straight edges with your end mills, you can then start to do molding toolpaths, where you use multiple tools, chamfer toolpaths, and also form tools you can start to think more about. And then you can import in 3D content as well to create your roughing and your finishing passes. You can create those either as part of your sign or off the side and add them on later. And of course we can do slicing. So if you have a thicker thing you want to create, then you can slice it into manageable pieces to create on your CNC machine. So those are kind of some nice upgrades that you can make from the 2D side.
Yeah, and like from those examples there, they look, awesome, and that's all just with VCarve. And then to kind of go one step further then, thinking about features that are in Aspire, obviously you have the ability to create your own 3D models, so you can create your own 3D relief, so create it in a way that is bespoke for what you want to do. You can create your own 3D textures as well, and obviously you do have the ability to import multiple amounts of clipart as well, so you have that advantage. And then you can import really impressive models where you can then make use of the segmenting feature to chop and slice it into manageable parts that you can then bring together, kind of like the saxophone there.
Exactly, yeah.
Yeah, and what I like about all of the examples that we've looked at, some of the key things that really stand out to me is the contrast, the text, ensuring that that's that it has a legible factor to it. And I really like that a lot of them have textures.
Oh, definitely, yeah. I enjoyed the idea of kind of dissecting these so we can figure out how they were made in different pieces. And I know for me, being not really great at finishing, being able to create them in different materials or even separately, and then finishing them, bringing them back together to make them look really unique. Now, Rebecca and I have never made a sign together ever, so we thought this would be kind of fun if we took away or walked away with our own ideas of what makes a really good sign and design up a couple signs and see what we get on with. So let's go ahead and give that a go.
Let's do it.
So I think my version of a sign that I might see down in Texas or in the southern states would be something that was rectangular, maybe with really raised text out of it, and maybe some other elements on the side. So let's talk about making a rectangle, which is pretty easy to do, maybe with some beveled corners. And then we'd put maybe a star in the background, which would be kind of very, very sort of like Texas, like a sheriff's badge sort of thing. And then maybe some really nice raised text in the middle, big bold letters that would pop right out of the sign. It might seem a little bit basic, but I think overall, I think it's going to make a really nice sign. And I might even add a bit of a beveled edge to the edge with like a form tool. That'd be pretty cool. Yeah, I like that. So, how you doing there, Becky?
Hello.
What you got?
That sounded cool, form tool.
Form tool, yeah.
So I thought of going like a cine sign, it was round, a lot of the studded sort of border, so I thought I'd bring that into it. Again, big text, some more text, perhaps we could inlay onto like a badge that goes in, some stars. I heard you mention stars. A 3D element I thought would be nice. We could do some, bring in some clip art. So, you know, thinking of the Western theme, cowboy hats,
nice.
Cactuses.
Cacti. Do cactuses really wear ties? I don't know. But okay, anyway, sorry.
Yes, there's lots there.
Nice, yeah. Well, see, I went with a rectangular sign. So what if we combined our two ideas maybe into one? So we've got a circle in the center with a rectangle in the background, maybe something like this. Sorry, really bad drawing here, but you get the idea. And then I can put my stars over here like I had suggested. Maybe put some texture in the background with that form tool. And then we have a spot in the middle that we could actually cut yours and put it right in the middle. And that way we got both of our ideas incorporated into one.
Hey, so let's do it. And we've got lots of different materials, lots of contrasted materials, different types. We've got foams, we've got different timbers, we've got sheets like MDF as well.
Lots of stuff to work with then.
Lots.
Okay, well, let's get back to our desk and start designing this thing for real in the software. Right on. Okay, so we have a brand new instance of VCarve Pro opened up here, and we're going to create a new file. And this is going to be a single-sided job, I believe, because there's no double-sided parts, I don't think, anyway. So we're going to start off with this. We can always change it later if we want to. The width of the sign, I think we're going to make it around maybe 26 inches by about, sounds good? Okay, by about 14 or 15 inches tall, maybe even a little more than that. So we're going to start off with a sheet that's bigger than that, so 30 by 18. And because this is where we're going to start our design, I'm not really too worried about the thickness of my material right now. It can be whatever I want, and we'll change it up later on as we need it for different sheets for other materials. We're going to be zeroing off the top of our material, which is fine. We'll design from the bottom left-hand corner of the screen. A very high modeling resolution right now. I'm not sure about any 3D content. There might be some later on, but for right now, we're going to leave it at that. It'll be fine. So we'll just do that. And my material setting is going to be, we won't do mahogany. I think definitely won't be using the whole thing, won't be in mahogany. No. So let's go with pine, because of course that's my least favorite thing to use, but we're going to do that anyway. And we'll click OK. We have this nice setup. Now I'm not going to go, or I don't think Rebecca's going to go too much into how to specifically use all the drawing tools, because I think you should have a pretty good idea of how to do that. So I'm just going to go ahead and dive right in to the first shape I need to make, going to be a rectangle. I'm going to flip over to my 3D view. I'm going to try to do as much of this as I can in a 3D view because we have a lot of really sort of in-view design tools and different things that we can do right there that are different than the 2D view. So anyway, so let's start off with a rectangle. I'm just going to draw a random rectangle in the middle here. And as soon as I do that, you'll see the bottom entry field has been highlighted for me. So now I can just go ahead and type in the dimensions that I'd like to have. So for this one, we're going to go with 24 inches across, and I'll press tab, and 10 inches tall. Now, if you remember, our combined sketch had the rectangle in the middle and then the circle. So I'm leaving a little bit of room on the top so we can have a decent sized center circle. And I'll press enter. Now when I think of these sort of old sort of signs, I think of them not being pointy squared corners, but having that kind of inserted radius on the corners. Yeah, it'll be all right. Scallop. Yeah, scallop. Yeah, it's a good way to put it. So to do that, I'm going to grab this circle right here, and I'm just going to drag outwards. You're going to see now I get a negative radius there. So I'm going to go to about 1 inch. That's great. Press escape, close this down. And now that's definitely not centered in my job space. You could press F9 to do that, or I could go over to my alignment tools and just align that to the center of my sheet. That's perfect. The next thing I think I want to do is draw the larger circle so that we can get sort of an idea of the full profile of the background. So to do that, I want to choose our Draw Circle tool. And I'm just going to draw a random circle in the middle here at any shape. Doesn't really matter the size, because now I'm going to have the ability to type in the actual radius that I'd like to have. Now I know I'd like this to be around 17 inches in diameter, which isn't the radius. We double that. So what's really nice about all of the number fields that we have in our software, you can do maths in there. So if I divide that by 2, that should give me the radius, and then press equals and press enter. That should give me an actual 17-inch diameter circle. And if I'm sure of that, what I can do is I can close this down. I can select it and press T on my keyboard, and you'll see that right there, the width and the height, they're 17 inches. That's perfect.
And that's a little top tip there.
Oh yeah, I use it all the time, especially when I'm converting millimeters. You mean doing the math in the field? Yeah. When I'm converting inches to millimeters or backwards, because all the stock we get here is in millimeters, and sometimes I'll start a job in inches, and then when it comes to actually measuring the material, it's not quite right. So I can do that in those fields, which is great. And I think we might touch on that later, how to do that. Great, so there we have the circle and a rectangle. Now what I'd like to do is to use these circles and the rectangles to give me the inside profiles that I'm going to want to have. So let's grab this outside circle, and I'm going to offset that inwards 1 inch. Okay, that's perfect. Close that down. That's great. And then, so this circle is the circle that I hope will be big enough for what you're going to come up with. Circle. Exactly. So I'm not going to touch this circle. This is now yours. And if I'm right, if I've done everything right, if I press T on my keyboard with that selected, it should show me that it's 15 inches in diameter. So hopefully that'll give you enough room. Perfect. Great. So I'm not going to go near that circle. I'm going to take this circle and this square, and I'm going to weld these together now. So make them one profile vector. So I can go over to my weld tool here. I'll click that, and there we have that. Now, I want to experiment a bit with this form tool that we have. So I would like to actually give the outside profile of this, instead of using like a molding tool path or a 3D component or maybe even a V-bit to give it a chamfer. I think that using this OG cutter, I think they call it, that's specifically made for a CNC machine, so I can plunge right into my material and go across and come out and not have any problems at all. I'm going to use that to go around the outside of this. So this is 1 inch in diameter-ish. Again, the actual measurements are in millimeters, but we'll convert those later once we talk about this. And so I'm going to offset this line inwards 1/2 inch. Okay, 0.5. And then we can click offset, and there we go. So I'm going to run this tool around this outside edge, hopefully, and it shouldn't encroach any further on my design than that inside vector that you saw. If all goes well, fingers crossed. That should be great. Okay. The next thing I want to do is to create the stars that are going to go to the left and the right of the circle. I like the idea of that sheriff star. I think that would look really cool. So I'm going to go up to my layers, and I'm going to create a brand new layer, and I'm going to call this stars. I'm going to give this a color, green. That looks good. And then we will make sure that's selected, and we'll go back into our 3D view. Now let's go over to our star tool. Now this is one of these tools that's been upgraded since we moved it into the 3D view. Where if I actually draw a star, I get some control handles here. So I can go ahead and size it outwards if I want to, in and out. Or I can change the inside diameter of it by making it more of a star shape or a starfish shape or more of a, I don't know what you call that. But
I love that improvement because you can see straight away without having to guess.
Yeah.
Numbers.
Especially when you're like us designers and you just kind of dynamically want to come up with something that looks good, then you can do it quite easily. So we're just going to go with that. Maybe what I'm trying to do is make sure that these lines are quite parallel, and they are. And then I want to make sure that the overall size of this isn't any bigger than 1.5 inches. So I want to put 1.5. This is the diameter all around it, and press enter. And that should be great. So if I hover over that, now it says that outer radius is 1.5 inches. So that's perfect. Now, sheriff stars, at least the little sheriff's badges that I've seen, always have those little balls around the outside edges. We'll go into our circle tool, and I'm going to create a circle with a radius of, or diameter, of 1/4 inch, 0.25. And I'm just going to click on the points here, and that should snap on there. Oh, that might be a little bit small. So let's change that to 1/2 inch then. And we'll apply that. Oh, that's better. So now we can just go ahead and drop those on there where they belong. Close that down. And I think that looks pretty good.
That's awesome.
Great. So I'll grab all of those. I'm going to weld those together so I just get a profile of it. And then I'm going to hold down my Alt key, and I'm going to drag it over. That way it'll lock it sort of in the center line, because that's where I kind of drew it. And I'll plop it right there. That's one star. This is one of the favorite things I do all the time. To copy something across your job or up and down across your job, it's really easy to do. If you hold down your Control key, that means copy. Shift means across one of the vertices. And I'm going to go H, which is horizontally, and there I have a copy now that's directly across from my other star in the same position, assuming I've centered everything else along the way.
Perfect.
And I think, Becky, that's pretty much all I need to do for my part of the design. So I'm going to save that off somewhere where you can find it and
Yeah,
you can load it.
and we'll continue with the top part of the sign. Right then, so I've got your file.
Oh, good.
So we're going to work straight from our design sheet. So obviously we've got our 15-inch circle. So what I want to do now is I want to create some borders. I want to create a border for our top element. So there's going to be lots of drawing circles. I'm going to throw some text in there, and yeah, let's just see how it goes.
Nice, nice, nice.
So we're going to jump into the 3D view first. I'm actually going to start by adding in a new layer. So we're just going to call this one border ring. We'll give that a colour. Let's give that like a dark blue colour and make sure that's the active layer. And then what I'm going to do is going to go in and draw a circle. So I'm going to snap to the centre because you're perfect and you've done everything from the centre, which is also how I work. So I'm going to snap to the centre there, and then what we're going to do is we're going to draw out a circle that's like 13 inches in diameter. So we'll close that out, and the idea is these two will form a border, and I'm going to create some studs that are going to go around that. But before we get to that point, what I want to do is I want to offset this vector. So we're going to go into the offset tool, and we're going to offset that one inwards by a very small value of 0.08 in there. And the reason for that is I just want to create a groove, like a vector, two vectors that I can essentially V-carve in between.
Oh, right,
so it's going to go very thin there.
Right.
So 0.08, so we're going to offset that inwards like so. And then we'll just close out. Okay, so what we're going to do now is we're going to look at creating the studs that we're going to have going in an array fashion around the border of our circle. So we're going to start by going into the draw circle tool. And then what we're going to do is we're going to just come up to the top here. I'm just going to snap to this point up here, snap to this point here, and then you see that? It's
wow, right on, yeah.
It's pulled out the centre line, which is really handy if you wanted to draw geometry that is, you know, exactly halfway between two other.
Yeah, I could use that technique when I was centering that star on the side, which I didn't do. I just kind of eyeballed it in there. So this would have been a much better way of doing it. Yeah, good for you, wow.
We'll get that one there, into there, and we can see, we'll make sure that we're hitting the right one so we can see my node there. Right then, so I'm going to pull this out, and then we're going to go for, I don't know, let's just eyeball this. 0.6 looks okay, happy with that. So we'll just close out there. And then we'll just zoom out. And what we're going to do is we're going to create loads of copies that are going to go around the outside of this border. So we're going to use this handy little tool down here, which is a circular copy. So we're going to click on that. That's going to open up the form for that. Top tip for you here, if you want to create a circular array where your center point is in the center of your job, you just double click on this point here. It's kind of a secret. There's no way that tells you to do that, so we're telling you.
Right.
So double click on that, and you'll see the target here. Okay, that's why I call it a target. It's actually a rotation center pivot point. That will pull to the center. And what we're going to do is we're going to now insert some information into that form. We want to tell it how many copies we want. In this case, we're just going to go with 50. Total angle 360, so it's going to go total 360 around, and then we'll just go ahead and press copy, and you'll see that it's done there. What I'm actually going to do here is I'm going to undo that. And I want to check this option here to group copies, so that when I do it, it's automatically
smart.
So copy, now they're grouped, and when I select them, they're all together. It saves me the hassle of grouping them all. Yeah. Okay then, so that's pretty much my border almost done. Then what I want to do is I want to draw one final circle. I'm just going to go from the center out. We're going to pull it out to around kind of there, that'll do, 12.2. And this circle is going to act as another part of our sign. So far what I've done is the border, that's going to be one part. And then this circle that I've made now is going to be another element, which we will hopefully be able to sort of slot in. So there's going to be a lot of layers in this. When I say layers, I mean a lot of layering up of different materials.
Yeah, those data entry fields are kind of neat because you were actually, when you drew that circle, you were just looking at the number that popped, that was filling in as you were moving it. So it's very dynamic. It makes it easy to draw quite accurately. So that's really neat.
Yeah,
nice.
Absolutely. Super handy. So we're going to take that, and then this is going to act as a pocket. So we're going to sort of recess to put our new element in, okay? So with that, so those are all the vectors that we've created for our sort of border back piece. So now I'm going to look at creating a brand new layer, which I want to copy this circle to. So we're going to right click on that. We're going to say copy to layer. We're going to add in a new layer, okay? And we're going to call this one central circle. And by organising all of my vectors into layers, it's just going to help me just easily identify what parts go where. So we're going to go ahead and OK that to say that it's visible and it's active. OK that, so now we're on our new layer. Okay, so for this, we're going to look at drawing in another circle here. So we're going to go in the circle. See, I love circles in this, it's very easy so far. So we're going to pause that again. I'm just looking at that field as Todd mentioned earlier and just going to kind of skirt around the 11.4. I actually want to change that, and I'm going to change that so that the diameter is actually 11.5, okay? Kind of want like decent numbers here. And then we could do that trick that Todd said earlier, T, and I can see it's definitely 11.5. I never used that. I've remembered that already. Okay then, and so this is going to form like another border for our inner part of this top part of our sign. Obviously, as we go ahead later on, we will start assigning all of these vectors to different sheets, so things will make a little bit more sense later on. But in the meantime, as we can see it as a whole, it's looking pretty good.
It is nice that using the colors to define your layers better. You can kind of plan ahead of time a little bit for maybe what you're going to do with those in the future. Like all the orange vectors might go on a certain sheet or whatever it is. So you can kind of get in your head, you can kind of get a feel for what you're going to do with these later on.
Absolutely.
Which is nice.
Definitely. Right then, so now I think we could bring in some text. So we're floating around the idea of like saloon, and so we're going to go and create some text. So in our text tool, let's just take a moment to talk about text, how that works in the software. So we kind of want a kind of Western cowboy looking font, right? So when you go into your text tool, we're just going to take a minute to talk a little bit about fonts. So you have access to true type fonts and we have single line fonts, okay? Now, single line fonts, these are what we actually ship with the software. And these are single line fonts that are typically used or applied with the engraving toolpath.
Exactly,
okay?
yeah.
And we don't really tend to use this unless you are using the engraving toolpath. Most of you are probably going to want to be using the actual true type fonts, okay, which is perfect for things like V-carving, creating inlays with, that sort of thing. And your true type fonts are fonts that are actually installed on your machine. And what I mean by that is your actual computer. And so when you go down that list, it's actually pulling everything that is already on your system. And so if there's a font if there's no fonts there that you don't like, then you need to get some fonts. Where do we get fonts from? So there's many different places you can get fonts from. Lots of free places available. Yeah. One of my favorites is actually Google Fonts. And with Google Fonts, you actually have the ability to, a lot of them are very open source from a commercial point of view, and also like from just to use like for yourself.
I've never used a Google font outside of, I guess Google Web, or I guess web pages use them, I guess, quite often.
I'll tell you what, I'll show you how we can use Google Fonts. Right then, so Google Fonts, fonts.google.com.
Oh.
And then the really nice thing about this is like when you do search for a font, it will also show you that you could put in the text. So for example, we want to put in saloon, and you can see it gives you a preview of what those fonts will look like. If you come down here, you can see there's all sorts of different categories. If you go in the vintage section, you can see this is, I feel like the font I'm gonna want is probably in this, because you've got like, you know, vintagey style. I want to go for that like vintage cowboy sort of font.
Oh, there's tons of options. It's crazy, wow.
Now this one, this looks right up my street, right? So once you found a font that you like, there's a fly. Here. Once you found a font that you like the look of, all you do is you just go to get font, okay, and then you just download the font, okay. So obviously I've got other ones in here, so I'm actually just going to download the font that I want, and we'll quickly run through the process of how you install a font, which is super handy, okay. So go to your downloads, and you'll see in here, you'll see when you open that folder, you got 2 files in here. So you want to open the TrueType font file, and when you open that, you'll see all of the font there. You just simply press install like so, and it's going to install that. At which point, what I'm going to do is we're going to quickly save this file, okay. So I'm going to save that out. I'm actually just going to close that down, and then we're just going to reopen VCarve, just so that we've just done like a restart on that, and then the font should be in our system.
Yeah, it's really important to remember that if you install a new font, you need to restart your software again, so we'll reread your font folder on your PC. So it's just good to remember.
Right, so with that then, what we're going to do is we're going to go into our create text tool. And then if we go to our drop down, so do you remember what it's called, Todd?
I think it's called Rye.
Yep, so a little top tip for you, if you press R on the keyboard, it's going to take you straight to the R's. And then we can go and find our newly downloaded font. There it is, right in there. And then we can just type in our word. So I'm going to put this into capitals. I'm going to say saloon, like so. And then we're just going to move. Let's just close out a second. I just want to actually center that, like so. And then I do want to size it a little bit. So what we could do is we could just look at holding down Shift, stretching it out, because you can do that with fonts. You can stretch them and it will still act as a font.
As long as you don't convert it to curves.
As long as you don't convert it to curves, yeah, that's absolutely right. Now I can see here, see with the A and the L, it's actually very close together. So what we need to do, and this is quite common where, you know, sign makers are obviously using text a lot, you need to look at the spacing and what we call that is kerning. So we need to edit our spacing of our characters to ensure that they're not, you know, either overlapping each other, because you will find when you download different fonts, some fonts can be quite tricky to work with. So, you know, you might need to just like check over spacing and things like that, which is exactly what we need to do right here. It's
a good idea, like you said, that if you find a good quality font site that really pays attention to kerning and all that kind of stuff, then you're usually pretty good. But a lot of the stuff you just find out there randomly, you might really want to be careful that things aren't overlapping, because they will, potentially they won't cut as you expect them to, or they won't look great in the end anyway. So.
Exactly, yeah. So with that, we're actually going to go back into our text tool, and that's going to enable us to make use of the kerning feature. Okay, so you can see we've got a little V, arrow that way, and the letter A, okay? So when the arrows are pointing together, that means that when we go ahead and click, that's going to bring those characters closer together. We want them to shift apart, so we're going to hold down Shift, and you'll see the arrows are now opposing each other, and then when we click, you can see that's creating that space in there. That all by eye actually looks okay. However, what I want to do is I want to be certain that I can get my tool. Now I do plan to cut this particular text out with quite a small 16th inch bit. Okay, so a little trick that I do is I just draw in a circle, just put in 0.625 in there, just click that in there, and then I just kind of, what I want to do is just see up, I can see that's going to go in here, can see that's going to fit nicely in there. And I just kind of just hover that around areas where I think it could be problematic. And then just go round. And yeah, that looks like it's going to fit there, there. And yeah, that's looking pretty good. So I'm happy with the spacing that we've got. So we'll just go ahead and just delete that circle that we used there.
Rebecca was really good. When she clicked in between the individual letters, it moved them out or in on their own. But if you held down the Alt key when you were doing that, it would actually adjust the kerning for all the letters, which is really kind of handy too. That way you're not trying to, if your font is quite balanced already, but you just want to add the same amount of space between everybody, then holding the Alt key is a great way to do that.
Yeah, that is a top tip there. Okay, so I'm happy with the saloon text. So now what I would like to do is I want to create a sort of badge that's going to go on the top, which is going to have person's name. So it could be whatever we want. And I feel it's quite fitting for us, Todd, that we use the Vectric mascot, Victor.
Oh, nice. Yeah.
So we're going to put Victor's name in here. But before we do that, I need to create some geometry because ultimately I want to create some text that I will then want to sort of follow the curvature of the badge that we want to create. Mm-hmm. So we're going to create some extra set of vectors that we're going to use to sort of align that text to. So we're going to start by taking our inner circle, okay? I'm just going to offset that inwards, okay? So I'll just do it by a small amount. So remember, this is the top part of our central part of our sign. So we're going to take that inwards by 0.4. So set that to inwards. Go 0.4, and then we're going to take that, and I'm actually going to do that by 1.8, offset that. Okay, so it's these two vectors that we're actually going to sort of create our badge with. So then we're just going to close that out. Okay. Now what I want to do is I want to create some geometry to sort of crop our top portion of the circle to create that badge. So for the time being, I'm actually just going to cut our saloon text. So by cutting it, I've still got it somewhere in computer space. And then what we're going to do is we're going to look at creating a little bit of geometry here. So we're going to go into the polyline tool. And so what I'm going to do is we're going to look at drawing in a line from the center point, but I want to get a particular angle. So I'm going to show you how we do that. So we're going to click in the center here, and you can see at the moment, all I can see is the current length of the line, which is super handy. But in this case, I actually want to know the angle of that line. And so if I cycle through using the down arrow key, you can see I'm presented with all different settings, which all are very useful in their own right, but we've got an angle option. And so we can see at the moment, it's currently telling me that currently we're at a 24.6 degree. I actually want to put that to 30. So I'm going to type in 30 and you'll see it will do that there. At which point then I can actually lock that angle.
That's really handy because I don't think many people know about the down arrow when you're drawing a line like that and how it brings up some other options for you. And again, those little floaty dialogue fields are perfect for adding in that information that we want.
Yeah,
good idea. Yeah,
exactly.
Great.
So I'm just going to click that there and I'm just going to press space. And then I'm going to start a new line, and then what will happen now is we can just try, and again, let's just go backwards. Mm-hmm. So this time, do some maths, Todd.
That's 150.
150,
that's right.
The one we want, that's it. Put that in there, press enter, and it drops that in, and then we can put that in place, right click to come out, and then we can just use our handy snipping tool here, just to, I think I did one too many there. No, I didn't. And then we can get that out like so, get rid of those, and there we are. We're super happy with that, and then we can paste our text.
Nice. Now I see what you're doing there with the nice badge on the top. Really good.
It. Yeah. So now I've got like my badge sort of dimensions here. However, what I want to do is at the moment, I just want to delete these lines out. So we're just working with the bottom curve, and I'm going to join them up, but we're going to actually join them up in a more natural way.
Oh, nice. Okay.
But we'll get to that shortly. So at this stage, what we want to do now is we want to actually put a name into this batch. So we're going to go back to our draw text tool. Remember the last font, I want to use that font again. So we're just going to pop that here somewhere. I'll make that a little bit smaller. Let's just try like 1 inch. That'll do. And then we're going to type in a name. Okay, so here we're going to go Victor.
Nice.
Victor's Saloon, okay? So I'm going to pop that there, close. I'm not too bothered about where it is at the moment because we're going to move that. And then what we're going to do is we're actually going to look at how we can wrap that bit of text to our bottom curve that we've just created. So with that text selected, we're going to hold down Shift. We're going to select that bottom vector there. And then we're going to go over to this tool here, text on a curve. And this will enable us to align that text or wrap it to a curve of a vector that you've got selected. So what we want to do here is we've got, as you can see, it's currently on the line here. And kind of don't want it on the line. I want there to be a little bit of a gap here. So we're going to go into this offset distance and we're going to go and put in 0.5 like so, and you can see that it's done that there for us like so. Okay, and then because I'm very fussy, I actually think there's quite a lot of space in here. So what I am going to do is we're actually going to go back into our text tool. And then in here, what I want to do is I want to actually bring that text closer together. So we're going to go into the 2D view to do that because we can't do that yet in the 3D view.
It's good to know if you try to kern your text and you're in the wrong view, then it's not going to work like you should.
And also whilst I'm here, I'm actually going to kind of just put that so it's more centrally aligned. And I'm just going to bring these together like so. Again, you can see I'm just clicking to bring them in. And then we'll just bring those in like that, and then we'll just take that and twiddle that around. I'm just purely doing this all by eye. I'm not too worried that they're close together because we're just essentially going to look at perhaps V-carving this text ultimately afterwards. Yeah, I think we've got a good, uniform space in there. So we'll just close out. Let's just press F just to fit that to our screen. We'll take a look at that in our 3D view as well. Okay, so now what I want to do is I want to kind of look at, rather than having a very straight edge badge, I want to kind of like just freehand it. Right. So what I'm going to do is we're going to go into the freehand tool, okay, and all I'm going to do here is I'm just going to just draw it. I kind of want to do it so it's like as if it's like a really like sawn off wood. Do you know what I mean? Kind of like that, something like that. And then we're going to do the same over here. So I'm just kind of going back.
It's nice that you're doing it different on both sides, so it looks a little bit more organic, like you said, like it's a broken board or something. Yeah, very cool.
Yeah. So then what we want to do now is we want to just make sure that we just tweak this a little bit. So we want to overlap it because ultimately I do want to sort of trim that. So I'm just going to nudge that over like so. Then over here, we're just going to bring that over as well, something like that. And we'll do the same on this side. So take that one, bring it over. That'll do. You can see I'm just being very rough and ready here. I'm not too fussed about the details. And then we'll go into our trim tool. And then we'll just take that.
The trim tool is great for this sort of thing, yeah. And as you showed earlier, if you hold in your button while you're moving the trim tool, it'll actually cut all the lines it runs into, which is kind of...
Yeah, absolutely.
And of course, quite often I'll run into this problem where I'll forget to tick off the little box where it says join up your vectors when you've trimmed them. So there's a little option there to make sure you have that clicked if you do want to join those up.
Yeah, definitely. And because we did have them joined, everything's joined up. I don't really need to do anything here. One thing I might do is just nudge that down. And again, this is just me being super, perfectionist here. I just want to kind of bring that into the center. Right, and so we're almost finished with the sort of our 2D design, our vector drawing. What I'm going to have here is I'm going to put in some stars. I'm just doing this as placeholders. I'd like to actually have 3D stars on this, but just for us, just sort of visually, I actually do want to look at, you know, putting those in position. So I can like roughly see what that would look like. Maybe we could just rotate that a little, and then we'll just do a Control-Shift-H over there. And then on the bottom here, I actually want to put in some 3D clip art, which we can have a look at that when we come to assign all of our sheets. So generally, I'm pretty happy with what we've got organised there.
Well, that looks really good. You did a whole lot more work than I did. I feel kind of bad about that. All the extra things you added to it look really sharp. So I think we've earned a break.
Yes, definitely. And so I think that's a good point to stop. After this session, what we'll do is we'll look at how we can sort of divvy off all of the different elements for our sign onto their appropriate sheets. We'll run through the toolpaths, get things cutting on the machine, and then hopefully by the end of that second session, we'll have a fully fledged sign that we can show you at the end.
Nice. So for you that are watching this live right now during our user group meeting, we have an actual real live session coming up next where we can answer some questions and do some other really fun things.